Well, hello, ladies and gentlefolk. Nice to see you again, back for the Positive Progress Podcast, PPP again, with myself, Nigel Streeter from Interact Communication and Connection, and my good friend and my partner for these purposes, who is
Robyn Harris of sorry, I was going to put the old name in there of
No, the new one now. Hang on, let's talk over. Say it again now. Ready?
Robyn Harris of Wellbeing.
That's the one. Today, it's Robyn's turn to put forward a proposal, an idea, or a suggestion in relation to how we go about trying to ensure people's well-being as positive as it can actually be. So I'm going to hand over to Robyn now, and she's going to put something forward. And for those of you who haven't seen these podcasts before, I don't know the content in relation to what she's actually going to talk about. She's told me what the title is, but I don't know the content any more than you do. So I could be part of the audience. So there we are. Over to you, Robyn.
Thank you, Nigel. And basically, we got onto this topic today because we were just having a little bit of a catch up before we started the recording. And I was mentioning that I'm currently working with a coach, and she is a money mindset coach. And Nigel was asking me about that, and we got into discussing all of that. And we thought, ooh, that's really interesting. Let's stop our discussion and bring it on here to share with you, because the coach is looking at a lot of different things within the course that I'm doing. It's exploring why we have money blocks, and it's tailored to the people within the group. And I'm beginning to see, therefore, what my money blocks are, what their money blocks are, and how that all works and how it impacts on the money that we're able to earn, our sense of our own value and worth, and how that impacts on our lives and the different areas in which it can limit us in our lives and in our experience. Because my particular blocks are around that sense of value and worth. So for me, it's been looking at why I have those blocks, where they've come from, and then how I can begin to address them, how I can begin to create a life that doesn't have those blocks in it. So it's been a fascinating process. And I'm beginning to see some shifts, which is also really exciting. That thought that there were blocks there that I wasn't aware of, because we all have our blind sides, and we maybe don't notice some of those blocks initially until we become conscious and we begin to explore, just begin to notice that life isn't quite how we want it to be, and begin to explore why that might be, and then go through that learning process. And I think it's also, as I've put actually in my book, about the conscious incompetence. So initially we are unconscious of the areas in which we're not fully competent yet. Then we become conscious, and that's kind of uncomfortable, isn't it? That kind of, ooh, I'm not very good at this, or I have a block in this area, or my mindset, my belief system is not serving me in this. And then we start to make a shift. So we become consciously incompetent, and then consciously competent as we get more consciously competent. So we're very aware of what we're aiming to shift and change, and what we're aiming to create. Like when we're driving, learning to drive, it's that mirror, signal, maneuver. It's separate parts of the process rather than just, oh, I'm driving and it's one smooth action. And then we go into unconscious competence, where we're just able to do it. We're able to just get in the car and drive, and without even thinking about it. And we might end up arriving at our destination and thinking, "Ooh, I don't remember much of that journey."
Remember doing it, yeah.
Yeah.
I think from that, what I'm hearing is, and this is something I thought for a long time, is that it's like really comfortable to stay the same, right? It's I don't know if I'd say the word easy, because that implies laziness. I'm not talking about laziness. I'm talking about a sense of comfort, right? And you actually just say, well, this is what I am, this is what I do, this is where I live, this is my life. And and that's fine, that's okay. But if you want to go through these phases that you were just talking about in that sort of psychological terms, like that mindset terms, then that's painful. That takes a bit of effort. And I think that's a central part of what I talk about, is the fact is, if you want to make the effort, it's not just a matter of just saying, Oh, well, I'll sort of try and do a little bit of stuff here, and I'll try and change this, change that. And this goes back to what we were talking about before about this hold the right hand. That there's not the way of doing things. And again, briefly, I'll explain why this actually happened in the first place, why we're doing this podcast, which is the fact that myself and Robyn are very, very much interested and enthusiastic about helping people to be as good as they can be, helping people to find a way of having this positive well-being, this, to make things better for themselves if they need to. But we go by a slightly different route, but we still got the same destination. We still got the same aim, which is to do those things I've just mentioned. And I think in relation to this worth idea, what we were discussing just before we started recording this was about whether your worth is dictated by external factors, as in someone saying, you can earn this much money, you can have this much praise, this much kudos, this much of anything, whatever way that you see worth. It's not necessarily just cash. But my thought on it was that I can't quite tune into that, because I don't necessarily think that my worth is dictated by value, if you like. Do you know what I mean? It's not something which I put the two bits together. But what I'm doing is I'm recognizing in lots of people's mind that is what it's about. And if you try to give something away, that's okay. But does it in other people's mind? This is a genuine question. Does it in other people's minds diminish the worth of that whatever, that product, that time, that effort?
I think it's a perception thing. So for different people, different perceptions potentially. But in the course that I'm doing, it's about how we see our own worth, and therefore how open or not we are to receiving. And that could be, in the people that I've worked with, sometimes it's been receiving love. There was somebody who came to me because she was looking for somebody who would do relationship counseling for one person in the relationship, because her partner didn't want to go along, so she couldn't go to Relate or the general ones. They always want to see the two people in the couple. So she came to me asking if I knew of any recommendations, and after a conversation she decided to work with me. And through our work we realized that the challenge she was experiencing was that she didn't feel worthy of love just in herself. And until she could open up to, yes, I'm worthy of love, I love myself, and therefore I can receive love because I believe I'm worthy of it, and therefore it's okay for me to receive it. But until I love myself, I'm not able to do that. I have this invisible wall, this invisible, as my coach is calling it, a thermostat. That question of how good do you believe your life can be? How much value do you believe that you are worth? Because that's as far as you're probably going to go, financially, romantically, whatever that might be. Because above that, it just feels off in some way. If you don't feel you're worthy of it, something inside of you, like that crab theory, is going to be trying to pull you back, because it just feels outside of your comfort zone. It's like you were saying about, well, how good can my life get if I think this is as good as my life can get? That's a belief, and it'll have come from somewhere. And if I'm thinking this is as good as it's going to get, there's potentially something around this is as much as I'm worthy of. I am not able to go any higher than this. So that's where I get stuck.
Sorry, Robyn, but just sort of the word that came into my mind then was deserve. We haven't talked about what you deserve yet. I mean, do you think that there are people who have problems regarding self-esteem, have problems regarding stress, tension, maybe depressive illness and other conditions, or just a general malaise in their life, right? Do you think that they believe that they don't deserve more? Do you think that they've created a ceiling in their life, and they say, "Well, I'm never going to break"? Like they used to talk about in relation to women being in business, right? And they said there was a glass ceiling, they had to smash through the glass ceiling, right? Because there was either a reality or a perception that they were being held back. They could only go so high. Do you think that in general, people have this, they create this ceiling in their mind in relation to what they deserve? They don't deserve to be any better, have any better.
You know me and how much I focus on language and words. So I wouldn't call it a problem, I'd call it a challenge. But also, I wouldn't say that people create it as such. In a sense, they do, but create it in that it's a thought they keep thinking. And as Abraham Hicks says, a belief is a thought you keep thinking. So it's a belief that they have, but that is initially from external comments or external things that we've seen, we've read, we've heard, that we've taken on board. It might be a parent, a teacher, a grandparent, somebody in our circle where we value their opinion, and they've said something to us about us that we've taken on board and thought, oh, that is what I am, that's what I'm worth. And the more we say that, and again, words are so creative. If I say, like you said earlier, my life is, I am. And we might have heard, like at school, oh, a lazy child. Oh, I'm lazy. Or a stubborn child. I'm stubborn. And that becomes our mindset and our belief, the more that we think it and the more that we hear it. And that can set us up for the path that our life takes. And it might include something like, I don't deserve any better than this. This is as good as my life gets. You can kind of see it on extremes because you'll see people who are born into a lower socioeconomic status and they just can't seem to break free of that. And if they do, because there are people who've maybe won the lottery, they don't manage to keep the money. Or there are people who've been born into a higher socioeconomic status and they just seem to assume that life brings them everything. And funny, it often does, and they get opportunities and connections. And part of that is like what they're born into, the society and the connections that they have in their family, but not entirely.
Do you think
it seems easier for them?
That's something which is very close to my heart, in as much as I talk an awful lot, hence the name of Interact, right? About communication and connection. And I think in some ways that's a self-fulfilling prophecy, in as much as if you are, like, young minds are very malleable, right? As you get older, I don't know if you're going to call it bloody-minded or stubborn. If you want to, you can. That's not a problem as far as I'm concerned. No, I'll stick with bloody-minded and stubborn, actually. But you become more assertive in relation to what you believe and what you think is right. And you become more confident in those thoughts, which is probably just a process of living longer and seeing more and doing more and accumulating that both positive and negative knowledge. But when you are in a position where you just pointed out the fact that people who are of a higher social status, and that's a whole conversation in itself as to what higher social status actually means. Let's presume it's to do with being upper middle class and having some money, right? You then are in circumstances where that confidence has been passed on through the generation. And you can go to a party, you can walk in and say, hi, my name's Nigel. How are you? What do you do for a living?
Yeah.
And that then gives you an automatic advantage over somebody. Again, they were probably told completely different things at the same age, when they were small or when they were young. And they were told, know your place. They were told, again, this is like all about worth. You must be spoken to before you speak. You must be reverential to other people, or that then manifests itself, bearing in mind I was a police officer, that then manifests itself in negativity, in violent rhetoric, in violence, in dishonesty and stuff like that. I think that those people, it's almost like preset for them, in as much as my father taught my father, taught my father, taught my father. And then no doubt the mothers were in the background saying, this is what you're going to teach him, right? But indirectly, it came from the dad. And he's then in a position to sort of take on, slightly off the subject, but primogenitor, where the male son always used to inherit the title. Even if he had two older sisters, they didn't get a look in because he was the firstborn male.
Yep.
And he would have a sense of self-entitlement built into him. And I think that that's something, not in a negative way, but in a positive way, that the likes of you and me can actually build into someone and say that you do have the opportunity to be this. You do have the opportunity to be that, or to achieve this or achieve that. However, the reality check then is always to turn around and say there's no guarantees in life. All you can do is do your best, and then you can work with people or work on your own, do whichever way you want to do. We were talking earlier on about there's no the way. And then you can make that effort we were talking about right at the beginning, rather than just sitting there saying, oh, I'm all right, I'm comfortable. But is that a real comfort,
Yeah, that's it. It's when it gets to the point of I'm uncomfortable in my day-to-day, and maybe I can't really put my finger on why, but I just feel like it's not really where I want to be right now. And I think we can get to that point where, on a superficial level, and to those around us, we look comfortable. And maybe we have been, or we've thought this is as good as it gets, so I'm just going to go with it. But sometimes, and maybe it's that midlife crisis, that we just get to a point where we feel, nah, I'm actually not happy. Even if, and there's a part in a movie, Eat, Pray, Love by Elizabeth Gilbert, where the main character goes, I've made these choices. I've created this life, and I don't like it. That, or it all looks good on paper, but I'm not happy. I feel unfulfilled. I feel I haven't reached the potential that I hoped I was going to reach, that I thought I was going to reach, and my life just isn't doing it for me. And as my boss in my first job used to say, we won't make a change until not making a change is more painful. So staying where we are is more painful than actually making that change. Because the change initially does feel like it's going to be scary. We don't know what's on the other end. And it could potentially be painful because I'm going to have to step out of my comfort zone. But if doing that, we suddenly realize is less painful than staying where I am, because staying where I am is getting really uncomfortable, then I will start to explore what those changes might be.
Are you putting that forward as a good idea or a bad idea? I'm a little bit confused.
Just as a point at which we can decide to make change. And up to that point, we might not. We might stay in our comfort zone, like you were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
And it's only when the comfort zone is no longer comfortable and that discomfort has risen to the point where we think, actually, I can't bear this anymore. I'm going to just go for it and make a change. I've avoided the change up to this point because I thought that was going to be uncomfortable, but now staying here is more uncomfortable. So I'm going to do something.
I got you. Yeah. What's the first step then, in your opinion? What do you think that not necessarily me or you, but including me or you, could do with somebody? And again, we've discussed the fact we don't do this for people, we do this with people. What's the first step, in your opinion, in relation to getting people past that hurdle? Because I always look at these things as in, it's almost like a little mini horse race, right? And in my mind's eye, I see these hurdles. But if you don't run towards that hurdle fast enough, or you don't bother running at all, you're never ever going to get over the hurdle. So what is the first step, in your opinion, in relation to breaking that spell, that negativity?
I think the very first step comes from the person themselves, reaching that point of, right, that's it, I'm going to make a change, and getting that real commitment. And then if they choose to, reaching out for help, or as I ended up doing, going off on a journey just making a start, whatever, as it says here, your way is the way or the way is your way, whatever feels right for that person. And it might be, actually, I don't know where to start. I'm going to ask for some help. Or I'm not sure I can do this on my own. I'm going to ask for some help. Or it might be like I did, go off and read some books and find inspiration and see where it takes you. That's why we have this podcast, because it's starting that conversation. It's putting out those questions. For me, that's how I see this, that we have a conversation, we ask questions which you might not answer, but it starts that conversation, it starts that thought process. And also, hopefully, it inspires and helps people to see maybe it is possible. Nigel's done it, Robyn's done it. Maybe I can do something. Maybe I can make a change. Maybe I can shift things. And also the knowing that we don't have to do it all at once. There isn't a magic wand,
Nope.
but that's actually a plus. It's not a negative. It's not a problem. It's wonderful because we get to make the journey. We get to make the changes. And in doing that, we learn and we grow and we become a good fit for the life that we want to be living. Versus if somebody had waved a magic wand for me back then, put me into the life I'm living now, I wouldn't have been able to sustain it. Because I wouldn't have known how. I wouldn't have felt valuable enough. I wouldn't have felt worthy or deserving of the life that I'm currently living. And I would have still had all of that anxiety, depression, etc. inside of me. And I couldn't have sustained living the way that I'm living right now. Because I didn't have the tools. I didn't have the resources, or I didn't have access to them.
Do you think it's to do with, again, we were talking about a feeling of, can't think of the word. There's several words I could use. I'm trying to think of the right one. Just give me a second. It's not a word I particularly like, but I'll use it anyway. I think it's correct. Is self-empowerment. Is it to do with the fact that almost like you feel you've deserved that, then that you feel that you've actually put all your whatever in a row, whatever the expression is, and you've actually got yourself together to go on that journey, to carry on that journey? Because for me, that rings a bell with me, because after I went through my period of depressive illness some years back, even though I was feeling awful, and again, in the future when we'll probably talk about what it actually physically feels like to be in that place, because it varies for different people, but the effects tend to be very similar. But even though I felt awful and I really didn't want to be in that position, and it felt extremely uncomfortable, I felt it was like a period of enforced relaxation for me. I felt as though, because I felt that my brain and my body were telling me to close down, to slow down, and hence panic attacks and all that sort of business, I felt as though that was a good time. That was like a period of time in my mind, actually in my life, for me to get all my, what is the expression? What you put in a row? Ducks.
Ducks.
That's
Yeah.
the boy. Ducks in a row. I'm even tempted to put a duck quack in the edit for that, but I won't. I promise you. But once you get all your ducks in a row, you know that there's like a sound foundation for you to move forward from. But I didn't choose that. That was a period of time which was enforced upon me.
And I think, I don't know if I've quoted it in previous sessions, but the A.H. Almaas quote of our pain and our conflicts are ours. They're literally ours. And like you said, it feels different for every individual. But it's the part of us that loves us the most, speaking to us, giving us a nudge in the only way that it can. It doesn't have words. Its vocabulary is how we feel. And I think that very definitely our bodies, minds, being will take over if we don't listen. It starts with a little poke, a little nudge, a little whisper, just saying, you could really do with taking some rest here. I'll just make you feel a little bit more tired. But if you push on through, as we've been taught to do, particularly for children of the 80s, push on through, feel the burn, keep going, don't stop. And our society is very much, busyness is of value. keeping active, doing is of value. You know, I'm tired. That's kudos. I've worked a 16-hour day. And this isn't good. This isn't teaching us well. I love Gabor Mate's title of his most recent book, The Myth of Normal, Trauma, Illness and Healing in a Toxic Culture, saying that's what we're living in. And that's basically why he's saying it, because we are just pushing on through. A lot of us are carrying trauma of various different kinds. And again, it doesn't have to be the big trauma. It can be the covert, cumulative trauma that we've talked about before.
The roof again.
Exactly, the roof analogy, yeah. We can be carrying this trauma and we're doing avoidance rather than, as your body was saying, sit down, rest, give yourself space, give yourself time. You need to process this stuff. You need to work through it and allow your body, therefore, to release it. And actually, if you listen to the word depressed, it's saying deep rest. So that's what our body's asking us to do, because that's what we need. We need that space, we need that time, but our society doesn't encourage us to take that. Quite the opposite.
I've just finished redoing on my YouTube page, right? I've just done another version of an old film that I found in relation to this particular subject. I've actually written on the comments down there, sorry about the quality of the film. It's not up to our normal standards, but it's an old one that we redo it. But I actually also put on there about the fact that I still think it's worth putting out as it is at the moment, because the message is so important. And in this message, which is something that I've talked about on numerous occasions from my own personal experience, is this idea of this pre-awareness before everything goes bang, and you go, oh, what the hell was that? How did that happen? Because a lot of people will not necessarily just drift into depressive illness. It'll just go bash. So to all intents and purposes, they think that it's just happened. They think, well, what in my case, right? I mean, I never ever talk about the gory things I used to do as a police officer, because I don't think there's any need to. People seem more fascinated with it than I do, so it's for some strange reason. Morbid curiosity, I think they call it. But I when this happened to me, I hadn't had anything specifically traumatic happen to me any time in the recent past. It just, I even went through my mind and thought, what's triggered this off now? But there wasn't a thing. It was a series of things. And the point I'm making is the fact that it's ticking away in the background. This is what I call the hunger. I've mentioned it before. This flitteriness, this an inability to concentrate, this sort of confusion, this just general feeling of unwellness. But I had no idea. Well, I didn't have the language to know what that was. I didn't, it was like blah, blah, blah. It was just, it was all over the place. When this happened, then I thought, oh my God, looking back in hindsight, 2020 vision, I'm thinking, this has been going on for months. And this has been the build up to this particular moment, I think if we achieve anything, I'll speak for myself actually, but if I achieve anything, it's by using my experience, my real life experience, to give people the information that I didn't have. And interestingly, in this film, which I've just re-edited and just put out again, which is from a year, 18 months ago, I talk about this idea of me talking to the me of then, the me of now, the me that knows these things, right? Talking to the me of then. And I've never, ever said it wouldn't happen. But I've said, and I still say, that the impact would have been substantially less, because forearmed is forewarned. The other way around? Forewarned is forearmed. I get it right in a minute. I'm making a bit of a habit of getting all these sayings wrong, so maybe I should avoid them, really.
Makes them memorable.
Yeah, just don't go there, right? Don't forearmed, whatever. If I achieve anything, for me, the real biggie is to be able to talk to people about what's happening then. And if they've already passed that point and they've had this event or events or whatever, it doesn't have to be a big explosion. like panic attacks and stuff like that. But there will be a point when they will realize that they are definitely not feeling normal. Hate that word, but normal.
As you say, normal for them.
But normal is
Normal.
different for everybody. Nobody
Yeah.
has the same normal,
Yeah.
But whatever is normal, that's actually spot on. Whatever is their normal. But in looking at these particular things, the big achievement for me would be able to sit down with those people and say, do you feel this? Do you feel that? Or something similar? Because it doesn't have to be the same as happened with me. But having read about these things, I know that they're in the same ballpark. They're the same form of feelings, form of anxieties and stuff like that. And I think if I can achieve that, that's like a huge tick to me, because of the fact that I've used my experience I didn't want and didn't like in a positive way to actually help them. So if anything, that's sums up the whole purpose of me doing this at all.
Yeah. It's that thing of how the worst thing that ever happens to us becomes the greatest gift that we ever received. We wouldn't ask for it.
Didn't want it though, yeah. But we just
exactly
received it
didn't
anyway.
ask for it, wouldn't want it, wouldn't necessarily ask for it again, wouldn't wish it on our worst enemy.
No.
And yet it does turn out, when we can work with it and when we can get curious with compassion and explore it for all that it has to share with us, it does turn out to be one of the biggest gifts we're ever given. It takes a certain amount of courage, but I think people have maybe a misunderstanding or a misconception of courage, that courage means you don't feel afraid. You don't feel the fear. It's actually feel the fear and do it anyway. And it goes back, and I think this is kind of related to the hunger as you describe it, that feeling I was saying, when it becomes more uncomfortable to stay where you were in your, what was previously your comfort zone, when that gets to being so uncomfortable because you've got this hunger, twitchy, not right, not happy, or potentially, if you keep on pushing, get to the point of collapse, and whatever form that takes. Because it's basically just the body doing what it's designed to do. We've got a set of different stress responses. Most people know about fight and flight. There's also freeze, flop, fawn, fidget.
What's flop?
Flop is it depends on the person's perception and what their experience of flop is. But flop can be, I can't move. I literally fall to the floor. I maybe faint or black out, or it can be, I have no energy today. I'm going back to bed and sticking my head under the duvet.
But that's exactly what happened with me when I had the panic attack, when my legs went from underneath me, and I thought I was dying. I genuinely did. I thought I had a heart attack or a stroke or something. And then you say about this flop thing. I mean, it's really interesting. You should give it that name, because
that's not my name.
Sorry,
it's not my name for it. There's a set in the learning that I've done. There were 7 Fs, though apparently there are more. I don't know the others, but I know of 7 Fs that I've put in my book, and just flop is one of them.
Well, flop is a very good way of describing it, actually, because I lay on the bed and I felt like the bed was sucking me down. And it was the most strange feeling. It was almost like being hypnotized. It was almost like somebody was sitting on the edge of the bed saying, you are now feeling as though the bed is holding you and you can't get up. And I just literally couldn't even. We actually made a film about it called Urgent Assistance Required. And there's a piece in there in relation to somebody portraying my part in that particular moment. And it's really well done within the confines of filmmaking, and with the confines of basically having no money to make a film. Sort of
budget constraints.
Budget constraints. I like that. That's much more tidy, as they say. So yeah, I mean, but that happened to me. I had the flop in as much as I was on the floor and I couldn't get off the bed. And that was then mixed up with this thing going on in my head and all this panic and all this sort of, not knowing what's happening and being scared. So it's interesting, flop. I never realized or ever thought of that as part of that process.
But every single one of those is actually designed to help us survive.
Mm.
So that's all it is. And I think part of when you were saying what is the first step for people, in my book, I talk about safety. And I think we've talked about that here before
Yeah, we
as
did. Yeah,
well.
we did.
Setting up that sense of safety. Where can I have a safe place? Whether that's working with somebody who holds that space for me until I'm able to hold it for myself, or I start doing as much as I can to put that into place for myself. Because when I have that sense of safety that I can go back to, I might end up being outside of it at times because that's life, but I can always then hopefully find my way back. And we are designed, our whole system is designed to be able to go into stress, out of stress, into fight or flight, into safety. And when we can do that in a very flexible, fluid way, that's actually good for our well-being, because our heart rate varies. When we're in fight or flight, obviously it's raised, it's higher. And then when we're in safety, it comes back down again. And heart rate variability is a sign of good well-being. When it can go up and down, when it's more static, that's not such a good thing. And also when we're able to go in and out, it's good for our vagus nerve. And a lot of people now have heard of the vagus nerve. It's known as the vagrant wandering nerve because it goes all around the body and connects with a lot of different organs. But it's the nerve that is highly involved in trauma, stress, anxiety. It'll respond to that. And if we have a lot of that in our lives, it can be really tense, and we can feel that we've got a lump in the throat. We can have our jaw tense and knotted, shoulders, because the nerve is having an impact on all of that. And there are exercises that we can do to support our vagus nerve, to bring us down out of the sympathetic fight or flight into that sense of safety and the parasympathetic. Putting those in place as well is another way that we can help ourselves just to get even ready to take that first step. Because when we're feeling like it's all too much, that is the time to stop, just to take that moment of pause, not to push ourselves. Because I think people talk about getting out of the comfort zone. And I think getting outside of our comfort zone, if we go too far, we push ourselves into fight or flight, rather than how can I go to the edge of my comfort zone, where I can just get used to how it feels to be there and to know that I'm okay and I'm safe. And I get to choose. I get to choose if I go forward. I get to choose if I go back to my safety for a while.
Yeah, it's an intriguing thought about people being in control. It's an intriguing thought to me because of the fact that I associate myself with being a very controlled person. I associate myself with, and this has come about from other people's observations, not mine. I'm not. This is not me saying blowing my own trumpet or otherwise. This is just what other people have said. And somebody, after I'd retired, spoke to me about a number of things, including, why have you not utilized your skills and abilities when you were a police officer, as well as your life skills now, in a more useful, constructive way, which is exactly what I seek to do now. This is why I'm here talking today. This is why we decided to do this podcast, even though that the headline is that we both go for the same place in a different way. The reality of it is the fact that the important bit is that same place. It is that achieving of that, being as best as you can be and all that sort of thing. And this ex-colleague of mine, she said, how could you use these particular things and your personal experience of this depressive illness to like a positive degree, and I thought, well, I've dismissed these things not because I wanted to, but because I didn't think about it. There was no conscious ignorance on my part. There was no sort of I'm not going to bother. There was no sort of I could do this, but I can't be bothered. there was just, she made this light come on in my head, like this light bulb moment. And I promise I won't put another thing about a light bulb up there either. It's okay. But this light bulb moment. And I realized that this wasn't about me being scared of going out there and saying what I think. It wasn't, it was about me having the confidence to believe that I have something that's happened to me involuntarily, completely involuntarily. So I combine that with my policing knowledge, problem solving, communication, blah, 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 and all those really good things with this involuntary experience to try and deliver something to other people. And I'm just intrigued by you talking about, how can I describe it? Slightly differently. This control, whether it's conscious control or unconscious control over their circumstances. Do you see what I mean? I think that's hugely important, that people understand that they have this power. They have the ability, if they want to exercise, and only ever if they want to exercise it, to actually make this move forward.
I think, again, control can be a word that I don't always like. I don't always like the way that it's used, because sometimes it's used more in a sense of control over.
Yeah.
And we can describe or be described as controlled, whereas actually it means we're quite rigid.
Yeah.
Because I used to be a control freak. And that's not necessarily a healthy or a happy way to be. Certainly wasn't for me. So what I'm thinking about more is knowing where I can have influence and to be empowered in that. The circles of control. So many things we worry about and get anxious about and fearful about, we don't have control over.
Exactly. Yeah. I talk about it all the time.
Yeah.
Do the doable, ditch the dross.
Yes. And be aware and conscious of where we are putting our energies. Do we have control over that? No. Okay, let it go. Let it be. Let it do whatever it's going to do, because nothing I can do about it anyway. And me throwing energy at it is not helpful to it, to me, to anybody.
Stick it in the box.
Stick it in the box.
We're back to that again.
We are.
Sorry, people, if you think we're saying all these daft things, right? It's actual fact. This is stuff we've talked about in previous podcasts. So have a look at them as well, and then you'll understand exactly what we're talking about. Sorry, Robyn, go on.
So being more conscious of how we're using our energy and finding ways to empower ourselves. And you brought up confidence, which is a really interesting one for me. And it links back to that sense of self-worth and our sense of our own value and deservingness, that word. And there were a couple of things I was thinking about earlier that I wanted to bring up. There was a study where a cohort of children were given to teachers given to a year in a school. And the teachers were told, these pupils they are the worst. They just are in trouble all the time. They cause havoc. They are a nightmare. You can't get them to sit down and be quiet and focus. Dreadful. They were actually some of the best achieving children in the previous year. But anyway, that's what the teachers were told. And that's how it panned out. By the end of the year, they were the worst year group. Dreadful. And their results went right down. Another cohort of children was given to some teachers, and the teachers were told, these children are the best. They are so intelligent, so well behaved. You will not believe how amazing they are. So those teachers took on those children, and it was true. They were the best children, despite the fact they'd been the worst in their year group the previous year. That sense of what the messages are we receive from outside and how we take on board those messages. And you were saying as well, when we're very young, our brains are more malleable. And the people that we look up to in our lives or have those status positions, parents, caregivers, grandparents, teachers, can really have a huge influence on us. Then once we're adults, we get to choose. We can look at what messages have I received? Where are they supporting me? Where are they not? Where am I confident? Where am I not? And where is that serving me? How might I like to change it? Where might it serve me better? Which is what I'm learning on this coaching course. Also, some years ago, because I was aware of my confidence issues, confidence challenges, I was looking for ways to support myself. And as I say, I'm a bit of a bookworm. So I went off and I found this book. I think it's called Confidence Code, something like that. It's written by two women, two researchers. And they wanted to know, why are some people more confident? Why are others not? What is the difference? And at the end of the book, they said their findings were, there is no difference between those people, whether they're confident or not confident, whether they put themselves forward in a confident manner or not. There is actually no difference other than how they choose to put themselves forward. They have the same fears, the same anxieties, the same concerns and worries, but they put them aside. If they're confident versus the ones who aren't confident, sit and think about those things and let them hold them back. They were saying that quite often for men, they're encouraged from from they're very small to go out, be boisterous, be outgoing, play in the mud, get dirty, fall over, fall out of trees, and that's okay. But little girls aren't. Little girls are encouraged, like you were saying, speak only when you're spoken to. Dress in pink and frills that get dirty easily, so you have to sit there and behave. And you must have perfect manners, and you mustn't get angry, and you need to eat very nicely so that you don't spill, and all of those sorts of things. So there is a lot from how we're raised in terms of how we are as an adult, but that's no excuse for how we are as an adult. Now, and this is, as I was saying, kind of why we have this podcast, so that we can encourage people to get curious with compassion and to ask those questions. Is my life as it is at the moment serving me? Am I happy? Am I feeling that hunger? What might I change? How might I change? What might look different? Because the more we start to think those ways, our thoughts become our beliefs. Our thoughts impact on our physical being. I'm listening to a great book at the moment, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself by Dr. Joe Dispenza, who talks all about what goes on in our heads is reflected in our bodies. I think, again, in answer to your question, how do we make the first step? Being conscious of our thought patterns, the beliefs that we are creating and feeding, putting energy into, and whether they're serving us or not, and how we might like to reframe them if they're not. What would be a better thought? What would help me feel even just a little bit better? And I think it's very important to take small steps, because otherwise, certainly me, I would feel overwhelmed and I just want to run away or go into flop, stick my head in the bucket so that I don't have to look. But making it small and manageable, small and simple, and then you can realize actually that's all it takes. Small, simple, consistent, and it makes big impacts. And as soon as you see the big impact, you build your own momentum, because you just want to feel that little bit better and that little bit better, and it's fun and it's exciting and you do more.
I did promise I wasn't going to do any more sayings, didn't I? But I've got to say,
well, you said, I don't know if you promised.
Okay, all right, I said, but that's good. That's good. I didn't promise. That's absolutely right. How do you eat an elephant? I love that one.
Yes.
Because it's something which is known by so many people, but they don't. They just think it. It's, to me, it's a bit of a mantra, to be honest, because it's common sense. It makes sense to me that if you've got what is either is or is perceived to be a big problem of any description, this elephant-sized thing, that you cannot. It is physically impossible for you to eat that in one go, in one sitting. And to me, if you can turn that from a fairly quaint little sort of psychological saying into something which is a reality, that's a real achievement. That's a step forward, just by limiting people's over eagerness to do too much, because that way lies failure. Because people will say, I tried this and then I went mad for a couple of days or a couple of weeks or what. It's like losing weight or going to the gym or whatever, right? And then you think to yourself, well, all you have to do is think of that saying and turn it from a saying into a reality. And you say, right, this is doable. This is how much I can eat of that elephant today. This is what this is all about. To try and again, important for me when I talk to people is you may never ever eat the whole elephant. That is not the aim. The aim is to eat as much as you can in a reasonable amount of time to move on to achieve whatever your aim or objective is. But
And you
don't
might
think
also want to
always have
share
to
the
get.
elephant. You might want to share it
Yeah,
so that you don't have to eat the whole thing.
yeah. But to me, it's just this almost like this magic of turning these words into action and then saying, I've now got the idea of what this is about. I understand this now, and this is something I can move forward with in a comfortable way. And this is a good comfortable. This is not what we talked about in the very beginning about this almost like this malaise, right? This is a good comfortable. This is a doable type thing a doable sort of step, step on this journey. But as we just agreed, then it's not necessarily about the end game being eat the heat. Too many H's in these sentences. Eat the whole animal. It's as much as you think is appropriate. And like you say, because this is something you talk about all the time, actually, there's two themes here that you always come up with, which is about this idea about sharing and this idea about changing. And you mentioned those an awful lot, even in the previous podcasts. And it's interesting that the first one, this sharing thing, is something I'm aware of, but obviously not as much as you. I don't think about it as much.
My share comes from what you talk about, the connection. And for me, that's what sharing is about. It's about building that connection. I think it's maybe, words, semantics, but also how we come at things from different perspectives, but we're aiming at the same goal.
Yeah. Interesting. And this all came about because of a conversation we had before we started recording.
Yeah.
I'm not going to ask you either one whether you had another subject or two what it was, because hopefully we can keep that
till next time.
What I was going to say, keep that until your next turn.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. No, it wasn't. Sorry, it wasn't an instruction. I'm intrigued now because I'm just literally just thought, what else did she have? Interesting. Right, there we are. Thank you very much. I think were we done for the day, or is anything else that you want to say now? Or
I think that's a good place at which to round up for today.
Thank you very much. Thanks for watching and listening, or listening, depending on how you're actually getting this podcast. If you want to get involved, that is very, very much something that myself and Robyn would love to see you do. And obviously, I've worked out it's down there now. The comments are going to be, because it's whatever. And if you want to say anything, if you want to ask any questions, make any comments, if you want to agree with us, disagree with us, that's absolutely wonderful. We're not here as people telling you that we know all the answers, because we most certainly don't. But if you do want to contact us, then Robyn will tell you how you can contact us in a less public forum, if you like. If there's something you want to say which is more sensitive, or something you want to keep just between yourselves and either myself or Robyn, then she'll explain how you can do that now with the names or the details at the end of the film.
Well, you've pretty much said it, Nigel, that our names and our email addresses will be coming up when we finish this conversation. Feel free to contact Nigel if it's something that he has mentioned, or me, or whoever you feel you would most like to connect. And if you're happy to put something in the public forum, then do please share below and give us a like and maybe a subscribe if you're interested in following further conversations. Because as Nigel says, we're already talking about things that we've mentioned in previous podcasts. So it can be good to maybe follow through on things so that you know where we're going with these conversations. But yes, we would love to interact with you. We'd love to hear from you. So do please get in touch.
And I always say this, no expletives. Anything is acceptable apart from swearing, stuff like that.
Yeah, keep it constructive.
It's nice to be nice. Thanks very much for watching and or listening from myself, and also from
me. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.